Hey everyone, happy Monday. For some people, it's Motivational Monday. For some people, it's Mindful Monday. But if you're with me, you're here for the Other Side podcast. Here on the Other Side podcast, we're all about talking about the other side of the mental health journey, the other side of what it looks like when you're healing from shame-based thinking, when you're going from one place where you think you have no value and no worth to truly understanding your value and walking in that value and creating space for yourself where others might want to make you small, right? So I'm really excited to be with you today on another Monday. Today's topic is one that I was been thinking about, and I remember it came up actually on one of the stops of my book tour when I was in South Florida. Shout out to everyone in Fort Lauderdale, all of you who came out to my book tour in Fort Lauderdale. Someone asked me, but isn't shame a good thing? So for those of you that don't already know, I wrote a book. It's called I Slept with a Married Man. Am I Still a Good Person? And I think just the title of the book by itself, right? Obviously, it's intentionally provocative. And I get into how does someone even get to that mindset where they're making that decision? And a lot of times it's coming from a place of having shame-based thoughts. I am unworthy. I am unlovable. I'm not good enough, those types of things. And so her immediate thought, though, after reading the title was, but isn't shame a good thing? Shouldn't people feel ashamed for doing something what you did, even, like, for example? And I think it was actually a really great question. And I'm sure a lot of people are thinking it. So I just wanted to talk about that. And this is actually in one of the sections of my book. And there have been several studies that actually have talked about what it means for someone to feel shame and then changing their behavior. And what all of the studies show, so I'm just looking at the book here, what all the studies show is that when someone is feeling their identity that they are a bad person, then there is no reason to change their behavior because they're bad. So why should they do anything differently? They're a bad person. They should continue making poor decisions and hurting people and hurting themselves and all of those things, right? So what's more important is that someone feels guilt around it. If you feel guilt, then it's I did something bad. And so that means that you can do something better. It means that you can make better decisions. You can do things differently. And that is the biggest difference between why it's important to recognize that shaming someone for doing something that did bad, and your children, your friends, family, colleagues, etc., isn't necessarily the thing that's going to get them to change their behavior. Because honestly, that's what we want people to do, right? We don't want them necessarily. It's not that we want them to feel bad and feel like a horrible person. Okay, you make them feel bad and they feel like a horrible person. And then what? Right? Like, that's the question. So, like, do you want them to move forward and change and do something differently? And so I just want to talk about one particular thing in the book where there's a study that Brene Brown points out where 400 kids were studied, and the researchers found that shame-prone kids are more likely to use drugs, alcohol, and have suicide ideation. Therefore, shame-proneness increases the likelihood of drugs, alcohol, and suicide. They found that guilt-prone kids were more likely to go to college and less likely to use drugs, alcohol, and suicide ideation. Remember, the difference between shame and guilt is I did something bad, where shame is I am bad. So again, it's this reminder, I think, for everyone about, like, the real difference between shame and guilt is this identification of self. And if you identify yourself as being inadequate, not enough, a bad person, or just bad, I am just bad, right? I have no value. I'm not worth it. I'm not enough. That is not enough to get you to change your behavior. It has to become the guilt thing where it's like, I did something awful and I feel really bad about it. This is what I want to do to change that. Thank you for However Hearted. It's probably on Facebook, but that's the difference, right? And so I just want to, again, if you haven't already, please go cop the book. There's a lot of really juicy tidbits in there, but that is the reason why shame isn't necessarily a good thing. So if you're thinking, oh, shaming has a good quality, turns out it doesn't. All right. Can't wait to see you guys next Monday for another episode of the Other Side podcast. Until then, have a great night.